Hello and welcome back to SGTV. It is Mental Health Awareness Week and we are joined in the studio once again by Lucas from Andy's Man Club, and we're going to be talking about all things mental health. Lucas, this is the second time you've been in the studio talking about all things mental health.
Yep.
And it's a pleasure to have you back in the studio. But for today, I want you to just sort of maybe go over some of the things you spoke about in the previous episode. So for anyone who's watching who may not have seen the first episode, just to get an idea on what Andy's Man Club is. So would you mind sort of unravelling that for us?
Yeah, 100%. So Andy's Man Club, we are a male suicide prevention charity. What we do, we run free talking groups for men in 280 plus locations nationwide. Very simple idea. We know that men can struggle to open up, don't always have a place to go and open up about the issues they face in life, whether it's, circumstances, whether it's trauma from years ago, whether it's, conditions that they might have. Andy's Man Club is a place where guys are able to access support free at the point of service, without any waiting lists, without having to sign up to anything, basically without, all the complication that can go with trying to reach out and get help. But that is what Andy's Man Club does.
Do you mind telling us how Andy's Man Club came about? Who is Andy? How did this actually become a thing?
Yeah, so Andy's Man Club were named after a chap called Andy Roberts. Andy unfortunately took his own life at the age of 23 back in 2016. Andy worked in the trade as well. He was a young dad. He had a really positive group of friends around him, played football on a weekend. What you'd call a lad's lad, basically. And unfortunately, he took his own life. A big surprise to everyone who knew him. It was a surprise to his family, a surprise to those friends, like I say. And his family, after the sort of dust had settled after Andy had passed, they decided that they needed to do something. They thought, it's all well and good saying men don't talk, but like I've just touched upon, where are they expected to do it? Like, if we go into the pub with us mates or anything like that, we're not going to open up, probably. It might be different for some people. I'm lucky to have a group of friends who sort of try and facilitate that, but if a guy tries to go to a GP, he could end up on a waiting list. If a guy goes to another professional service, he might end up having to pay for it, he might not be able to afford. So they thought, let's create something that's free at the point of service in Andy's memory, and that's what they did.
So you mentioned about how many locations are there now?
280 plus. I say 280 plus because it changes on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a cover-all for us because, we struggle to catch up with it. But we're all over. We're from Aberdeen all the way down to Plymouth, pretty much everywhere in between. We've seen a real increase in the Midlands over the last few months as well, which has been really positive. But yeah, we're all over and we run online as well.
Yeah, and that's grown since the last time you was here, wasn't it? So you was here, we're currently in April 2025, you was here in October 2024?
Yes, October 2024.
So how much has that grown since then?
I think it's grown by over 50 groups, which is astounding. I mean, if you take, when I started working for the charity back in 2021, we had 28 groups nationwide, and now to have 10 times that, and obviously for that growth period over the last 6 months to be so high, it's just crazy. It shows that there's a need for it.
Absolutely. You wouldn't be growing if people weren't attending these things, and it's amazing that people are attending.
Yeah, and we're only scratching the surface, to be completely honest. Attendees now are sitting at over 5,800. Next Monday we expect that to rise again. But if you do the maths, you're talking roughly 24, 25 people at each one of those groups. We have some really busy groups like Wigan, for example, in Lancashire. You've got across a couple of venues up there, you've got close to 100 people attending. But when you consider that we've got groups in London, Liverpool, Manchester, Glasgow, Leeds, on the outskirts of Birmingham as well, the number needs to grow. And we know that there's so many people out there who we need to reach, who we need to get in front of.
And it's all free, completely free?
Yeah. Always will be. Yeah.
Before we go into maybe how some of these groups work, would you mind sort of touching on your story? Because the reason why we've, obviously not only because it's Mental Health Awareness Week, but you've worked in the trades. As you mentioned, Andy from Andy's Man Club was in the trades, and we looked at the stats, and there's a lot of research that says mental health in the trades is one of the worst. And what better way to try and help than to get someone like you on the show and
Yeah.
maybe touch on your story if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, no, definitely. So, I mean, my story, if I talk about my involvement sort of in the trade as well, like I grew up raised by my grandparents. My mum had complex addiction issues. She really struggled sort of through her life. So raised by my grandparents, and my granddad is a painter and decorator, so he works in the trade. 74 and he's working today.
Still going?
Yeah, still going. He's got the bug. I think he likes the sort of thrill of being out in and amongst sort of guys, and girls as well, and sort of cracking jokes, all that type of thing. But that I had that sort of upbringing. I used to go and help my granddad, on his jobs. I say help, I probably hindered him, to be fair, for a bit of pocket money. That was my background, and I sort of grew up in and around that environment, to be fair. But while I was growing up, obviously having a mum who had severe addiction issues and having a dad who were out of the picture were a difficult thing. Led to all sorts of anxiety. My grandparents sort of took over looking after me when I was around 10, and that were after my mum had had quite a public sort of psychotic episode, which I think I touched upon last time.
Yeah.
That started off a feeling of anxiety, which I later understood to be anxiety. At the time, I didn't really know what anxiety was. It led to me sort of feeling I struggled to fit in. I had all these sorts of struggles. And I started to mask them by using substances, by drinking, by smoking cannabis, by basically doing anything I could to escape. Then sort of later in life, I'm paraphrasing a little bit now, but I ended up working in the security industry, in the electrical industry, worked in marketing and also in sales. And I think everybody knows in this industry, like, it's very, very fast paced. Like, it's an industry as well that I think is still it's still traditional, shall we say. It's still very male dominated. That's obviously changing, but it's that fast paced, almost like I'd call it Wolf of Wall Street type industry sometimes. Where you've got big characters, you've got people who are basically who've got those sort of like old-fashioned sort of macho values a lot of the time as well. And so for me, in that environment, there were a lot of times I felt as though I couldn't open up. There were people, don't get me wrong, at my company, within the industry, who I could talk to, who I could open up to. But that environment, very much that sort of like dressing room, locker room environment that it sort of fostered, I found it very difficult. I got to a stage where I was having panic attacks every single week where I was working in my old job because I had all these anxieties sort of plaguing me. I were, using substances, I were drinking, I were, struggling quite a lot. And eventually, COVID came along. I got put on furlough for 6 months. I had a bit of time to work on myself to, basically practice some really useful techniques that helped me massively. And then after COVID, I ended up having a change of jobs, working for Andy's Man Club. And to be completely honest, before I got the job and, while I was growing up, even though I had these struggles, I used to think that Andy's Man Club were a load of rubbish, like I did. But I think that the messaging and everything that, that surrounded it, really, like, it was a defence mechanism for me to think it were a load of rubbish. And then when I actually got involved in it, when I attended that very first session, and when I opened up for the first time, and when I realised I was somebody who'd suffered from anxiety, and I realised that panic attacks were a lot more common than people thought, that really gave me a lot of strength and pushed me forward.
Yeah, I think anxiety and panic attacks, similar to you, when I was younger especially, if anyone I know who would have found out, for example, have had a panic attack, I'd have probably been making fun of them. And
Yeah.
I feel ashamed to say that now, because I didn't understand it. I thought it was, like you say,
Rubbish.
silly, rubbish,
Yeah.
a load of rubbish, like what you're getting, until it happened to me. And then it will absolutely floor you, and it puts you in another realm of perspective, if anything.
Yeah.
And I've had friends who have said the same thing to me recently, who've come to me and openly admitted they've had panic attacks, and they feel silly for admitting it. And I'm like, I feel so much more respect for you now, having told me this.
Yeah.
I don't consider you as weaker or less of a man. I consider you as more of a man. For opening up and telling me that, because it takes courage,
Yeah.
it takes fortitude to actually own up to it, admit what you're going through, and to overcome it, doesn't it?
And that's what we say, and I think I'll have touched upon it on the last episode probably, but displaying vulnerability shouldn't be a sign of weakness. No. It's a display of strength, because it's difficult to be vulnerable and to open up to people, and it's a horrendous thing to do. You know, and I think it does take a great deal of strength. I think also, and I'm not sure if I've touched on this before, but I think we're brought up in this country to think that if you're a confident person, you can't suffer from anxiety. I've never lacked confidence, like never, ever, ever lacked confidence.
You literally tour the country, coming on podcasts, talking to groups, companies. You don't come across as not confident. Well, so there's a prime example. Yeah. Anxiety can get the better of the best of us.
Of course it can, and you know, I think it's still something that sort of that plagues me. I think, you know, even since we filmed this episode, like, you know, there were some life things that happened. There were my stepbrother's wife passed away suddenly. Literally a couple of weeks after we filmed the last episode. I had a big family fallout, and you know, I think my point is, I don't want to come on here and, you know, make out like my life's all rosy now.
Like you're the finished article.
Yeah, that's it, you know, because I'm not, and life still throws curveballs at you. And one of the most valuable things I've done since coming on the last episode is started counselling, and I absolutely love it.
Attending counselling.
I attend counselling now, and I think it's a fantastic thing. One-on-one counselling is brilliant, and I'd recommend it to anybody. But I think that, you know, the thing is, mental health is a work in progress, and you know, everybody's got to. It's like a plant; you've got to keep on watering it, haven't you? You know, and it'll stay alive and it'll grow.
Yeah,
like, that's what it is.
Someone said, I heard the saying once, something like, if you're waiting for someone to be the finished article, to be the perfect person, then you're going to be waiting forever, because like you say, it's a work in progress. You can have all the tools under your belt to cope and get you out of difficult situations in your head, but there's going to be times when it's still going to come chipping away and try and floor you, but it's having that resilience and understanding. And it all starts with, like you say, opening up, figuring it out, and whether that's going to counselling, talking to a friend, Andy's Man Club.
Yeah.
But Andy's Man Club, the group sessions, would you mind telling us how that would be? So, like me, before you come along, I hadn't actually heard of Andy's Man Club. So when you was telling me about it, I thought, wow, this is actually brilliant. And they're local, so there's plenty to go to. Everyone's in the same boat. So would you mind talking us through how that sort of works?
Yeah. So, like we say, you just turn up on the night. You're basically greeted by somebody on the door who'll offer you a free brew and a free biscuit. As you can tell, I've had plenty. But they'll offer you a free brew and a free biscuit, lead you to a seat, and then you pass a ball around and you answer 5 questions. Questions 1, 2 and 3 remain the same every week. They are, how's your week been? Can you give me a positive from your week? And then, is there anything you'd like to get off your chest? That final question, that question 3, there's a break after it, because obviously some of the subject matter that gets shared is quite heavy. And that's where we want to give people an opportunity to talk to other people in the room during that break and share a bit of their own experience. You know, if you go in and say you've got a gambling issue, there'll be someone else there who's been affected by gambling addiction, who might be able to share, you know, their own experience of coping with it or dealing with it. And it's very much a community-focused thing. It's not, you know, somebody with qualifications coming out of their ears, like, you know, with very little life experience potentially telling you what you should do. It's relatable, it's relatable, and it's all experience-based. Final 2 questions every week are quick-fire questions, which should send a shudder down your spine after the last time we did it, because I think we asked you a couple. You exposed yourself.
Similar to you, I consider myself quite a confident person. I have to do this in front of camera. But I'll admit, I've suffered with anxiety, panic attacks, things like that. And I can't remember what the question was, but it got me. You know, I felt quite emotional on camera. And
I can remember. I think it were brilliant, but that's exactly what it's designed to do. So those final 2 questions, the first one is always thought-provoking, and I think it were one that we asked you who's your role model, and I think that's what it was. And I think I remember the last episode now, but the final question's always a bit of fun. So my favourite is always, what's your guilty pleasure song? That's one that comes up quite a lot, and I think we asked you that one last time as well, but
I can't remember what that was.
Yeah,
it probably changes every week.
Yeah, it'll change for me too, but that's the idea, so it wraps it up nicely. Everyone's sort of in a more positive place because they've had that laugh on that final question. There's only 4 things you can't discuss at an Andy's Man Club session in England. Religion and politics are the first 2 things. They start wars. We don't want any wars breaking out at our sessions. Third one is medication, so you can't mention any specific medication. That's because we're a non-professional service. We're all based on shared experience, so we're not equipped to give that advice on medication. The final subject you can't mention at the English and Welsh sessions is criminal matters. You can't mention those just because of complications that can arise from them, but equally, if you wanted to go and say that you've made progress in a case that you've been fighting or whatever, then you can say that.
Keep it vague.
Just keep it vague, exactly. And then the 5th topic you can't speak about is Scotland exclusive, and that's football. You can't speak about football in Scotland, and that's because it ties into the religious and political aspects of things. So, yeah, that's how it runs.
Okay, but it's quite simple, isn't it? It's
very, yeah.
And it's just meant for that reason. You can just go up, you can go in, turn up. You don't have to book, you don't have to pay. No one's going to judge you. You're probably surrounded by people who are suffering from things similar to you that it gives people someone or something to relate to make you realise you're not alone.
And the beauty is the sessions are run by people who started off as group users, and I think that it is a real mix of people who are going because they've had a bad day, people who are going because they've got skeletons in the closet, which is an awful expression to use, but stuff that they want to open up about from 15, 20 years ago. But you get some people who just go every week and they get into a rhythm of going, and they're there and they're in a much better place than when they first started off. And I think that they're a really positive tool for people in the room because they can see this is where I could be 6 months down the line if I carry on with this and if I keep working on myself.
Yeah, and we're going to do a series of episodes where we're going to be talking about sort of different things, mental health related, coping mechanisms, all that kind of thing. So please stay tuned for that. But Lucas, I mean, not only do I want to thank you for coming on the show, I want to thank you for opening up because it's a big thing to do. I realise just because you go around the country doing it regularly doesn't mean it's going to be any easier for you. It might be easy, just sort of off the back, but it's still not easy to pull into yourself experiences and trauma that you may have gone through, and to admit as well that you still struggle, you're still having to attend counselling. So it takes a lot to come and do that, and I'll thank you for doing that because,
no problem.
As we say, there is a stigma and there shouldn't be one. You're a big, strong, tough-looking dude. You've been in the trades, but it doesn't matter. You can get anyone. It doesn't matter. So, and that's the message I think we both want to get across. Just forget the stigmas. You said a quote to me last time, something about you'd rather attend, what was it? You'd rather not attend a funeral, or
I think it's I'd rather probably go to a session than go to a funeral. I think it'll go with that, but that's what it is.
Yeah. Although I'm crap at remembering things, but the sentiment stuck with me. Yeah. And if opening up to someone is going to save yours or someone's life, we'd much rather you do that, and that's the bones of this, I think.
100%.
So, but please make sure you stick around, and we're going to do some more episodes about mental health, Andy's Man Club, and all things mental health related. So stay tuned for that one. Yeah. As always, please remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification button below, and we'll see you in the next one.